The throne room of the High Kingdom has never echoed with such desperate, confused shouting. King Aldaran the Mighty, ruler of the 7 United Realms, stands before his assembled war council, with his hands shaking in disbelief. For months, they've been preparing for the ultimate confrontation with the Legion of Shadows, marshalling armies, forging legendary weapons, and placing all their hope in one person, Kaelin the Destined. The prophesied hero who was supposed to grow stronger with each passing day until he could single-handedly tear down the gates of eternal darkness. But what's happening instead is so impossibly wrong, so catastrophically opposite to everything the prophecies promised, that even the most faithful believers are starting to question whether the gods themselves have gone insane. Kaelin, their mighty savior, their legendary champion, their last hope against annihilation, is shrinking. Not just getting younger, he's literally getting smaller. And every passing hour brings him closer to being completely useless in the fight against ultimate evil. If you want to understand what's really happening behind the scenes of this prophecy and which secrets have been hidden by the ancient guardians, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and comment below if you already suspected that the Chosen One could defy even the most basic expectations of heroism. Let me paint you a picture that will haunt your nightmares for weeks to come. Just 3 months ago, Kaelin stood 8 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to carry the hopes of an entire world, his arms thick as tree trunks, capable of wielding the hammer of divine justice that weighs as much as 3 grown men. The prophecies were crystal clear about his destiny. He would grow in power and stature until the final battle, becoming not just a hero but a living force of nature, a walking earthquake of righteous fury that could punch through mountain ranges and kick down the walls of hell itself. But here's where everything goes absolutely, spectacularly wrong, in ways that will make you question the very nature of prophecy and divine planning. 3 months later, Kaelin stands barely 6.5 feet tall, his armor hanging loose like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes, and the legendary weapons that were forged specifically for his mighty grip now slip from his diminishing hands like they're made of soap. Can you even imagine the horror spreading through the Allied armies when they realized their ultimate weapon against darkness was becoming less ultimate by the day? General Thaddeus Ironforge, the most decorated military commander in the history of warfare, spent 17 straight hours recalculating battle strategies, trying to figure out how to adapt their entire war plan around a hero who might need a stepladder to reach his enemy's kneecaps by the time the final confrontation arrives. The siege engines of destiny, massive war machines built specifically to be operated by Kaelin's prophesied giant stature, now tower over him like monuments to cosmic comedy. The armor of invincibility, forged by the greatest smiths of 7 kingdoms and blessed by 49 different gods, currently makes him look like a child who raided a museum exhibit. But wait, because what happened during yesterday's weapons training will absolutely shatter your understanding of how prophecies are supposed to work. Master Gareth, the legendary weapons instructor who has trained kings and heroes for over 60 years, watched in growing disbelief as Kaelin attempted to lift the sword of infinite sharpness, a blade that was supposed to feel light as a feather in the Chosen One's destined grip. Not only could Kaelin barely lift it, but when he tried to swing it in the prescribed pattern of ultimate victory, he nearly toppled over from the weight. The sword that was supposed to cleave through the very essence of evil itself clattered to the ground like a dropped dinner plate, and the sound it made echoed through the training hall like the death knell of hope itself. The political ramifications of this impossible shrinkage have created chaos that makes regular civil wars look like polite disagreements. King Valdric of the Northern Territories, who pledged his entire kingdom's resources to support the prophesied giant hero, sent a furious diplomatic message demanding explanations and threatening to withdraw his armies if someone doesn't figure out how to make their savior stop shrinking. Queen Lyanna of the Eastern Realms, whose battle plans specifically called for Kaelin to literally step on the shadow fortresses and crush them underfoot, is reportedly having daily screaming matches with her military advisors, trying to figure out alternative strategies that don't require a hero the size of a small building. The Shadow Lords, meanwhile, are having the time of their eternal lives, watching this cosmic catastrophe unfold. Lord Malthius the Soul Render, who has been preparing elaborate defenses against a giant hero capable of punching through dimensions, now spends his days laughing so hard that his evil laughter shakes the very foundations of his dark citadel. His war demons, who were trained to fight a colossal opponent, are now confused about whether they should take the shrinking hero seriously or just pat him on the head and send him home to his mother. But here's the truly terrifying part. What if this shrinking isn't random? What if the Shadow Lords themselves have found a way to sabotage prophecy itself? Think about the implications of what's happening here for just a moment and prepare to have your mind completely blown. Master Aldarius, the most learned scholar of prophetic interpretation in the known world, has discovered something in the ancient texts that changes everything we thought we understood about divine destiny. There are references hidden in the most obscure footnotes of the most forgotten prophecies to something called the inverse manifestation, a cosmic phenomenon where a hero's power grows inward instead of outward, where strength is concentrated rather than expanded, where becoming smaller actually means becoming more potent in ways that mortal minds struggle to comprehend. According to these nearly lost texts, there have been legends throughout history of champions who saved the world not by growing larger and more imposing, but by becoming so concentrated in their power that they could slip between the cracks of reality itself, strike at the heart of evil from angles that conventional heroes could never reach, and defeat darkness not through overwhelming force, but through precision, so perfect it could cut through the fundamental bonds holding evil together. But if this is true, why wasn't anyone told? Why were all the preparations made for a giant hero when the prophecy apparently called for something completely different? The answer to that question will make you question everything you think you know about the nature of prophecy, divine planning, and the cosmic forces that shape destiny itself. The High Priestess of the Temple of Eternal Wisdom, after spending 3 days and nights in deep mystical communion with the source of all prophecy, emerged with revelations that have shaken the very foundations of religious understanding. She discovered that the prophecies everyone has been following aren't the original divine visions at all. They're translations. Translations made by mortals who couldn't comprehend the true nature of what the gods were trying to communicate. So they interpreted divine visions through their own limited understanding of what heroism should look like. The original prophecies, according to the High Priestess's earth-shattering revelations, never spoke of the Chosen One growing large in physical stature. They spoke of him growing large in spiritual density, becoming so concentrated in divine power that his physical form would actually compress to contain energies that would normally require a body the size of a mountain. The word that was translated as giant actually means intensely focused in the original divine language. The phrase interpreted as towering over enemies really means transcending the limitations that make enemies possible. The entire foundation of their expectations has been built on a cosmic misunderstanding. Can you even begin to imagine the chaos this revelation has caused? Among the religious authorities who have spent centuries building their entire theological framework around the coming of a literally giant savior, the Archbishop of the Northern Cathedral reportedly fainted when he heard the news and hasn't been seen in public since. The Order of the Sacred Measurements, an entire religious organization dedicated to preparing infrastructure for the giant hero, is having what can only be described as a collective existential crisis. Their sacred rulers and divine measuring tools, blessed for centuries in preparation for the giant's arrival, now seem like monuments to cosmic comedy rather than divine preparation. But here's where things get truly incredible, and what you're about to discover will make you realize that this apparent disaster might actually be the most brilliant divine strategy ever conceived. As Kalen continues shrinking, he's now barely 6 feet tall and still decreasing. He's begun manifesting abilities that no hero has ever possessed in recorded history. He can slip through cracks in enemy defenses that would be impossible for a normal-sized person to navigate. He can strike at pressure points and weak spots that larger warriors could never reach. Most remarkably, his concentration of divine power has become so intense that a single touch from his now smaller hands can purify corruption. That would take a giant hero hours of battle to cleanse. The weapon masters have begun creating entirely new categories of legendary armaments, specifically designed for a hero whose power comes from precision rather than overwhelming force. The needle of divine justice, a blade so perfectly balanced and magically sharp that it can cut through the conceptual bonds holding evil together. The armor of infinite subtlety, protection so sophisticated it makes the wearer effectively invisible to evil's detection while amplifying their concentrated power. The gloves of surgical precision, gauntlets that allow the wearer to perform feats of heroism, so exact they can dismantle entire evil empires by adjusting single critical details in them. Foundations. Leave a comment below about whether you think becoming smaller actually makes our hero more powerful, or if this is still a cosmic disaster waiting to happen. The training regimens have been completely revolutionized to accommodate Kalen's new form of heroism, and what the master trainers have discovered about the true nature of power will blow your mind completely. Instead of teaching him to swing massive weapons with overwhelming force, they're now teaching him to find the single perfect point where the smallest application of concentrated divine energy can trigger cascading effects that topple entire evil empires. Instead of learning to crush enemies through raw strength, he's mastering the art of unraveling the very concepts that make their evil possible, dissolving their power at its source rather than confronting it head-on. The psychological impact on the armies has been surprisingly positive once they understood what was really happening. Soldiers who initially despaired at seeing their hero shrinking now report feeling inspired by the idea that true power doesn't come from being bigger than your problems, but from being so precisely focused that you can solve them from angles no one ever considered possible. The motto of the Allied forces has changed from "Follow our giant champion to victory" to "Watch our focused hero unravel evil from within," and morale has never been higher despite the initial shock of the transformation. But the Shadow Lords have begun to realize that their initial amusement at the shrinking hero might have been premature, and their growing concern is creating ripples of fear throughout the Dark Realms. Lord Maltius, who was laughing at the diminished Chosen One just weeks ago, has now begun implementing desperate defensive measures against attacks that don't come from the direction of overwhelming force, but from the direction of surgical precision. His massive fortifications, designed to withstand the assault of a giant hero, are completely useless against someone who can slip through the gaps between their own structural integrity and dismantle them from conceptual weak points. Lady Vorthania, the mistress of psychological warfare, has discovered that her usual tactics of making heroes doubt their own strength are completely ineffective against someone whose power comes from accepting smallness rather than claiming greatness. Her vast armies of despair demons, trained to overwhelm heroes through sheer numbers, find themselves unable to locate a target that operates on principles of concentrated focus rather than expansive presence. The entire dark strategy of defeating heroes by making them feel small and powerless collapses when facing a hero who has discovered that being small and precisely powerful is actually the ultimate form of strength. The cosmic implications of this transformation are staggering, and what the greatest minds in the kingdom are beginning to understand will revolutionize everything we think we know about the nature of good and evil. The ancient texts speak of evil as something that grows by spreading, by becoming larger and more overwhelming, by consuming everything in its path until it dominates through sheer size and scope. But if evil operates by expansion, then perhaps the most effective good operates by concentration, by becoming so focused and precise that it can strike at the heart of corruption with surgical accuracy that leaves no room for evil to regenerate or adapt. Master Theodorus of the Academy of Cosmic Philosophy has proposed a theory that will make you reconsider everything you think you know about the eternal struggle between light and darkness. He suggests that the cosmic battle isn't really between big good and big evil, but between scattered evil and concentrated good, between chaos that spreads everywhere and order that focuses on exactly the right points to restore balance. A hero who becomes physically smaller but spiritually more concentrated represents the ultimate evolution of good strategy against evil. Instead of trying to be bigger than the darkness, becoming so precisely focused that you can illuminate its exact weaknesses and dissolve them with perfect efficiency. The training academies across all 7 kingdoms have begun developing entirely new curricula based on this revolutionary understanding of heroism, and the results are already showing in the next generation of warriors and champions. Instead of focusing solely on building physical strength and accumulating powerful weapons, they're now teaching students to identify the precise points where small applications of focused good can trigger massive positive changes. The new generation of heroes won't be giants who crush evil through overwhelming force. They'll be precision specialists who can unravel entire networks of corruption by adjusting single critical elements with perfect accuracy. As Kalen continues his journey toward whatever his final size will be, he's now approaching 5.5 feet tall and showing no signs of stopping his reduction. The weapons masters have begun crafting artifacts that operate on completely different principles than any legendary equipment in history. The compass of surgical strike, a device that doesn't point north, but instead points to the exact location where the smallest amount of concentrated good can do the maximum amount of positive damage to evil's infrastructure. The map of critical weaknesses, a mystical chart that doesn't show geographical features but instead reveals the conceptual pressure points where evil's power structure is most vulnerable to precise intervention. The final preparations for the ultimate battle have taken on a completely different character than anyone imagined possible. Instead of massive armies marching across vast battlefields to confront evil in head-to-head combat, the strategy now involves small, precisely coordinated teams moving through reality's hidden passages to strike at corruption's foundational weak points simultaneously. Kalen, now small enough to access paths and possibilities that would be impossible for a giant hero to navigate, will lead missions that operate more like cosmic surgery than traditional warfare. But perhaps the most remarkable development is what's happening to the very nature of prophecy itself as everyone watches these impossible events unfold. The oracles and seers who have spent lifetimes learning to interpret divine visions are discovering that their understanding of prophetic language has been fundamentally transformed by witnessing how completely wrong everyone's expectations turned out to be. They're learning to read prophecies not as literal descriptions of future events, but as symbolic representations of cosmic principles that might manifest in ways no one could anticipate. That the Shadow Lord's final desperate strategy reveals just how profoundly this transformation has altered the cosmic balance of power, and what they're attempting will either destroy everything or prove once and for all that concentrated good is infinitely more powerful than expansive evil. They've begun pulling their scattered forces of darkness back from their spread across multiple dimensions, concentrating their own power in an attempt to match the Chosen One's focused intensity. But here's the cosmic joke that will determine the fate of all reality. Evil's fundamental nature is to corrupt and spread. So concentrating, it creates internal contradictions that threaten to tear it apart from within. The final confrontation approaches, but it won't be the clash of titans everyone expected. It will be a battle between precision and chaos, between concentrated good striking at exact weak points and concentrated evil trying to maintain coherence despite its own self-contradictory nature. The outcome will determine not just the fate of this world, but whether the very concept of heroism evolves beyond traditional expectations of size and strength into something far more sophisticated and ultimately powerful. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because in our next video, we're exploring what happens when our shrinking hero reaches his final size, and why the ancient texts suggest that might be when he becomes powerful enough to not just defeat the current darkness, but to prevent the conditions that make evil possible in the first place.